There's a lot of comparables between the fitness industry and the mental health industry. 30 or 40 years ago or whatever, like just physical exercise is viewed very differently. If you were just like running around on a sidewalk on your own, people would probably be judging you like, "Well, that guy is looking like a weirdo." And I think if you even look farther back, people would even get arrested of just like, "What are you doing? That's nefarious. Like, why are you running around like this?" But there was a stigma associated with that. And now it's like the opposite. If you're not exercising, it's almost like, what are you doing? Like you obviously don't care about your health. And so I do think mental health is on some sort of similar trajectory.
This is All Things Fitness and Wellness, hosted by Krissy Vann. Together, we're uniting industry thought leaders and fitfluencers on the mission to inspire innovation and encourage people to live a life fit and well. On today's episode, we welcome Brendan Sullivan. When Brendan was a senior at Yale University, he not only excelled as the captain of the varsity track team, but also identified a critical gap in the mental health support available to his fellow athletes. Noticing the prevalence of mental health issues, including eating disorders and the lack of accessible treatment resources, Brendan decided to take action. Fast forward a few years, and Brendan has become the founder of ZAMA Health, a pioneering behavioral and mental health platform tailored for the athletic community. In this episode, we explore the crucial importance of mental health advocacy within the fitness industry, the innovative strides being made in athlete wellness, and the exciting journey of ZAMA Health's acquisition by Volt Athletics. Before we get to it, be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry thought leaders and influencers. I'm your host, Krissy Vann, and this is ATFW. Brandon, I am so happy to have you on the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, especially because this episode airing in May, which we know is Mental Health Month, a pillar that I know is so important for you, both personally and professionally. So first of all, thank you so much for joining me here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's good to see you again.
Well, and it's great to see you because I know much has changed. Very exciting times for you with the recent acquisition of ZAMA Health. So tell me a little bit about how that even came to fruition for you.
Yeah, sure. So Dan Giuliano, I think he was on your podcast beforehand. He's the CEO of Volt and has just been a great mentor to me over the years. He was actually an early investor in the company as well, but just someone who's been incredibly helpful to chat with on just navigating not only just the fitness space, but college athletics and even kind of the other, verticals that we really want to serve, whether it be youth sports, the military, and things of that nature. And, they've been thinking for a while too of how do they kind of continue to, really support their coaches and athletes and build more of a comprehensive kind of development platform, and realizing, mental health is a critical part of that. And so it kind of just became a discussion of, do we go try to do this larger standalone thing, or especially kind of given where, the markets are and everything, we just felt like this was kind of a better case scenario for, both us, both the Volt team and, our investors and kind of the folks that we work with. And we could really build a better product with the backing of a large kind of established company like Volt. So we're super excited. Yeah, it just kind of was made public a couple of weeks ago. We've obviously been working on it for a while before that, but yeah, really excited to join and support the team. And the Volt team has been great. I can't speak more highly of them, and not only as just really as people, actually, just they're great individuals. So I'm excited to be on board.
It's nice when it's such a natural fit, and also to have them as an early investor. They've really believed in the core of what you are from the beginning, because at the end of the day, you've grown this obviously with your team. So to a degree, it's your baby. You want to make sure that it ends up in the right hands, and you're still very much involved. So talk to me a little bit about how your role pivots then with this acquisition.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I'm joining as the GM of athlete well-being, and really the focus is kind of on kind of really pushing the ZAMA platform, in the near term. So we're still standalone platforms, at least in the short term. I think a lot of what we're trying to do is really suss out what is the best way to integrate it over time. And so part of that, and part of what my role will also be is chatting with, other coaches, other athletes, and really understanding what would that ideal experience look like for you. But in the short term, it's really, pushing the ZAMA product forward. And at the same time, where opportunities might arise, also kind of trying to, suggest Volt to potential clients that we work with as well.
Well, it's going to be exciting times. And I know that your advocacy for mental health and really the idea of creating a platform happened at a pretty young age. So talk to me about obviously track was your sport, as I understand.
Yes.
You went to Yale. So where was this seed initially planted where you're like, something is missing here and we could do this better?
Yeah, I mean, I think of just like the importance of, taking care of yourself from a much more holistic perspective really began when I was young. I mean, my mom was a psychiatric nurse practitioner, and actually someone who really kind of helped inspire me to really start the company and really, educate me on the value of it. And when we really started, it was really more of like a general sort of wellness hub that I actually kind of even started with her or more in our local community. And obviously that concept really changed over time and really started to focus on the athletic side. But a lot of it came with just kind of also looking back on my experiences. When I was I was captain of the team, the track team there in college, and we just had a lot of challenges in our team from eating disorders and anxiety, stress. The year after I graduated, one of my teammates died by suicide, and it's not a thing that was unique to us. It's an issue that you're seeing all across college athletics, and especially now with NIL and the transfer portal, like the amount of pressure that's being put on these kids is just insane. From sports betting to all these other things. And so what we really wanted to do is really create a platform that really addressed kind of those unique needs, but something that could really be applied across a larger audience. I think a lot of times, whether it's in the supplement space or the physical health space, you've seen a similar thing of starting with more of this elite or small group, but really how can you democratize that and expand that to a broader audience? And although the end goals are very different, college athlete is very much about performance. On the general fitness side, a lot of the kind of the challenges that impact you are similar. It doesn't always have to be depression. It doesn't always have to be something like an eating disorder, motivation or finances. Like these things also play in both of these worlds. And so we really thought, like, how can we create a platform that can really kind of migrate to these different verticals, even if those end goals might be different. And so, again, started with college athletics. There's a new mandate that has gone into effect this year that's requiring certain resources specifically for student athletes, starting at the D1 level. But I think that will also evolve over time. But I think, as you know, the fitness space is really becoming more about preventative care, mental health care. I mean, the FIT Act is really, symbolic of a lot of that stuff. And so I think it's just an interesting time to really kind of be supporting people in that way. And so we're really excited about it and something that I think is not just for athletes, it really is for everybody.
Well, and exactly as you speak, that firsthand experience. And I know I was talking to Dan about this, how much the stigma around mental health has changed in such a short period of time. I imagine when you would have been studying, the stigma would have been 10 times greater than even what it is today. The conversations around mental health are so much more to the forefront. That being said, resources, unfortunately, are things that I think we still need more and more of. And so you saw the niche there and what the impact was in the athletic side and was like, let's make a change. Did you go into business then from there? Was this just yourself, or how did you grow when you were in those early days?
Yeah, and I would also say too, in the stigma stuff, I think a lot of it too is just the language around it. I think like the whole love yourself and love the world, there's probably a place for that, but it just doesn't resonate with a lot of people. It doesn't resonate with a lot of guys, but it doesn't resonate with a lot of women either, and athletes especially. And so I think part of it too is when you think about mental health, it doesn't have to be a clinical thing. When you look at college athletics, for example, the top 3 challenges are academics and planning for the future and finances, like not starting as clinical stuff. And so our whole approach is, how do you really address sort of these kind of life stressor events before they really become a clinical challenge, and always having the ability to, meet with a therapist or psychiatrist if you want to. But our core belief is that the vast majority of challenges can be solved outside of a hospital setting or something like that. And I think even just how you talk about it, like no one loves to be called a patient or something like that. And so I think there's like simple things of just how it's communicated and marketed that I think makes it a lot more approachable for people. To your mention about like starting it, we really started more of like as a services enabled company. So we were hiring all of our own therapists, we're hiring all of our own psychiatrists, and we kind of found a few things. The first part is cost is still an issue. Even if you accept insurance, you're still paying, deductibles and copays that are too expensive for people. The second thing is like there's actually a lot of kind of base level knowledge you can provide to people that doesn't require you to sign up for a $150 session with a therapist. So like, what is CBT? What is, fear avoidance? What are these different sort of topic areas that we can have experts kind of provide that insight so that you can kind of gain that before kind of going and meeting with someone. So it's a way to democratize education in that way. And the third part was kind of getting to what I was saying, where there's a lot of challenges that can't only be solved in a clinical setting. If it's really academics, that's what your challenge is. There's only so much a therapist is going to do. Like, you really probably need to be with a tutor or learn tricks of how to address it. Like, so there's only so much that, they can do there. And so how can we kind of couple clinical and non-clinical? Because not only is it more effective, but it's also a lot more affordable in a lot of ways.
I just really appreciate what you highlighted on the stigma thing, because it is so true. It's equipping ourselves with the tools. And it's one of those things when you look at our physical health, for example, you
Yeah.
know what to do. Most humans know innately what they should be doing to keep that healthy, but we don't necessarily look at our minds in the same way. I always kind of relate. I used to work in television news, and I
Yeah.
had this theory that the environment in the newsroom was so depressive a lot of the time, and
Yeah.
people's problems seemed amplified. And when I
Yeah.
dialed it down and I was like, think about what we're ingesting all day. We have an IFB in our ear that's constantly hearing the same news loop. Well, that's going to have an impact. So when you look at the inverse side of that, you're like, if we do the things to fill our brains with things that are healthy for us, or have those tools and resources already in place for when life actually throws the big curveballs our way, or the stressors are bigger that way, then they're more digestible and easier to get through. And I also appreciate that you highlight that when someone's in the thick of it as well, from a mental health standpoint, you never want that minimized or diminished, what that means for somebody. Like, it's easy to use those blanket terms, but when you're really in it and you don't have those resources and tools, the hole can feel so deep, and then more that just gets added onto it, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think, like, there's a lot of comparables between the fitness industry and the mental health industry. I was doing this panel a while ago, and I think I'd mentioned how, like, 30 or 40 years ago or whatever, like, just physical exercise is viewed very differently. If you were just like running around on a sidewalk on your own, people would probably be judging you, like, well, that guy is looking like a weirdo. And I think if you even look farther back, people would even get arrested of just like, what are you doing? That's nefarious. Like, why are you running around like this? But there was a stigma associated with that. And now it's like the opposite. If you're not exercising, it's almost like, what are you doing? Like you obviously don't care about your health. And so I do think mental health is on some sort of similar trajectory where, I do think that it will become more normalized in a way as it's becoming part of your normal routine. But I think that it does require changes around then how it's talked about. It does require the access of where you're getting it, and just kind of the types of resources involved. But there's actually a lot of similarities, and I think in kind of both of those interests in both those markets. And why we're really excited about Volt is they've really developed this expertise on the physical health side. And so being able to truly integrate them in a way is really what I think the future is for kind of holistic health. And so that's why we're really excited to be a part of that too.
Yeah, I mean, it is an undeniable natural fit, but I imagine a lot of growing had to happen on your side before you could get to that point of being a company that would even be desirable to be acquired. So talk to me about
Yeah.
some of the entrepreneurial leaps that you made and the learnings that you made along the way. I mean, I get it. Yale, you obviously had solid education, and then growing up with the fact that your mom was a psychiatric nurse, commendable profession. One of my very best friends is one, and the amount of learnings that I get from conversations with her is incredible. But I know starting a company means you don't necessarily all have the know and know-how off the get-go. So what were some of those big learnings and challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. I've always wanted to do that, start a company. There's a few things that I really found helpful along the way. One is we did a Techstars program earlier on, did an accelerator program, and also another one of our investors, One Mind, was super helpful. And I think what's awesome about stuff like that is you kind of get like a mini business school of development of, like, building a business and what that means and modeling and all this stuff. The second part was really kind of creating more of like a founder community. You can gain so much from talking to other people who have similar lived experiences. And again, like, sometimes it would just be like venting to someone like, this freaking blows. But other times it can be more like actually productive of like, does anyone know a lawyer that's really good in, healthcare for startups or something like that? And so kind of building that was super helpful along the journey, and just kind of creating that kind of network. And then I think, like, reaching out and just having like a great mentorship network where I kind of, when I talk to people, it's kind of almost like when you're in undergrad or something and you reach out to people in the corporate world, and most people will talk to you because they just feel bad for you. And I think the same thing is like starting a company. They're like, well, that probably sucks. So yeah, I'll probably talk to this kid. So I think I've just been really fortunate to have an incredible group of mentors and people along the way. And so that has been enormously helpful. So I think like, yeah, that mentorship, doing more of that mentorship from kind of people in the industry, I think doing more of that accelerator type program and really building out kind of the founder network. And I think what you learn along the way, I think my kind of couple takeaways is you can't get too excited about the ups or too down about the downs. You're going to have way more downs and you're going to feel them hard and it's tough. And I think kind of, and going into the second part is you really need to like maintain and cultivate kind of like those close relationships that you have, whether it's your family or friends or your partner or whoever. And I think that, again, I was fortunate to have an incredible, group of support from behind me and probably tested them all times. I'm sure the amount of times I was trying to complain about fundraising to my girlfriend, she probably wanted to kill me. So I do think it's really important and really hard sometimes when you're so focused on just like the company to really take yourself outside of that and really make sure you're also taking care of those relationships around you, because in all likelihood, the company is going to fail. And so you don't want to kind of lose all the people that are close in your life if that were to happen. And so I definitely think I didn't do it the best. And I think I could have done better things. But I definitely know it was in the back of my mind a lot of just like, I got to make sure that, you take care of those people that are close and around you.
Also, when we look back and we say, maybe I didn't do it the best, to me, I'm like, that's growth. If there's
Yeah.
ever times that you look behind you and you're like, "Ooh, not so," you're like, that means I've grown from whoever that person was. So that's a
Yeah,
positive.
I don't know, because I've always done everything perfect. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, me too. How
Yeah.
weird. I mean, those poor souls in the world that are, oh my goodness. But it is so
Exactly.
true. The mentorship is such a big one. And I think now, obviously, you have the opportunity to do the same for people that are coming up. So when you look at mentorship, what is the important qualities of a mentor? How were they most helpful to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I look back on, some of my really close, well, not look back, they're still around. I still talk to them a lot.
You succeeded and they were like, I'm out.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, I think like, again, coming back to this lived experience part, I think it's really helpful for people to just normalize what you're feeling or why you're feeling a certain way. And so I think like just sharing stories of like, I cannot get this person to respond to this thing for, I've emailed them 20 times or whatever it is. But I just like hearing like really successful people be like, yeah, actually, I had to deal with the same thing. Here's a story about it and why it doesn't matter. Or maybe on the random off chance, someone's like, yeah, you should probably, really actually like take more, put more thought into it. So I think like what mentors, like great mentors are really helpful is, helping you not get kind of like overreact to certain things so that you can kind of get back on track to doing what's really necessary to push your business forward. And so I think a lot of that is kind of being that emotional support in some ways, but I think it's also like helping guide you on, what you should really be focused on or not. Obviously people can, make connections and do all that kind of stuff. But I really think what I found most valuable from mentors was kind of that, like kind of helping kind of gently guide and stuff like that. So there's a lot of great people out there. And so I've definitely have benefited from working with and being around a lot of them.
Well, it shouldn't surprise me that that's your answer either, because obviously you're somebody that grew up with a large awareness around emotional intelligence and why that matters to have these real authentic conversations. And ultimately, it connects experiences and then the ones that you're dealing with when you realize somebody's walked similar footsteps before. Doesn't make your path easier, but you're like, oh, this is survivable, which
Yeah.
is even just
Yeah.
nice to have that roadmap and that example. As you look at, and I get, obviously, you aren't our therapist on the podcast today, but you obviously work with a lot of individuals that are operating at high levels in business.
Mhm.
How do you preserve your own mental health when you're getting to that level? And perhaps what are some qualities that you see that people may want to look at the blind spot a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's always easier to give advice than to take your own, and so I would definitely not be the poster child of good mental health over the past, year and a half, 2 years. I think I've never been under more stress in my entire life. And I look back on certain things and I'm like, wow, that was like a stressful experience. So I think that for me, I think one of the best ways for me personally, I mean, everyone does it differently. Some people find, meditate, if you're thinking about actual mental health practices, meditation or journaling or thing. For me, actually working out kind of does start to ground me. And I think, when you're traveling all the time and doing this, that like would disrupt that process. And so I think that kind of, was helpful when I could actually get back on that. But I think whoever you are, creating like infrastructure and just consistency around it is very grounding for you. So I would say the consistency and creating some sort of thing that you're really doing and more methodical about that can kind of like structure and orient you, I think is helpful. At least it was for me. I do think having a supportive community around you is critical. I think like when we think of our company and where I want to see them go in the future too, like the biggest thing that I hear from like talking to whether you're at a college or fitness facility or anything that a lot of people are challenged with is this sense of connection and community. I mean, we are as a country are like the most lonely we've ever been when we have the biggest ability to actually connect with others than we've ever been. And so it's an interesting kind of breakdown there. And so I think one of the things that we really try to do as at a company is like, how do we help solve for that? How do we loop people back to in real life experiences? How do we really start to foster kind of more of those genuine connections? And we're in the very early innings of that, but something that we've been thinking about. But I would say like me personally and things I think that is like in athletics too is consistency is really big. Having that supportive community. And I think also just being coachable. And that applies to the general work market too, like strong beliefs loosely held, like the ability to actually not be so set in your ways. And I think that's not just good as a person, but as a business leader, as you have to really learn how to adapt in a changing world, especially in kind of worlds that have not been necessarily that tech forward in the past. Healthcare, I would put fitness into that too. I would kind of say those things.
No, it is so true. If you have that framework already in place, then exactly that. When it does get stressful, you're like, at the very least, I can hold on to these tools, even if that's all I'm holding on to. It's the minute those slip away from us, and physical activity, obviously a massive one. And we will get to advocacy in a moment here, but they do go hand in hand, but often those foundations can end up the first things to go, even when it's something that you actively preach. Like even for myself, I talk about it all the time and you're like, uh-oh, I'm not taking my own advice. This is why I feel like X and Y. The nice thing is when you know it, you catch it a lot faster. So you're able to self-audit.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's also, I do think I'm sure there's examples of this in other professions too, but starting a company really just for myself helped me really, I think, understand, like this sounds so cheesy. It really did help me understand myself better in a lot of ways. What am I good at? What am I not good at? How do I handle stress in certain ways and stuff? And so, especially kind of coming out of it now, it's also kind of starting to make me like kind of look back and be like, okay, like what would I have done differently? And even for my own kind of health, like how would I kind of approach things differently? Because, everyone gets stressed and everyone goes through those, tough moments and stuff. And so how do you kind of set yourself up to be successful when those do happen? It's actually like productive ways of dealing with it because there's unproductive and unproductive means of kind of dealing with things. And so I think that's different for everybody.
Absolutely. Well, you kind of touched, and I know that you can only speak to it so much because we're early days into this acquisition, but
Yeah.
what are your hopes and kind of what are your short-term goals as you take on this new role? What is your life going to look like as you're niching into this new space under the Volt Athletics family?
Yeah, the short term, it's really how can we continue to grow ZAMA in these different markets and also potentially even the new markets that, Volt's already in. For example, they do work with the military. Both my parents from the military. It's a group I really care about. And obviously there's a lot of challenges there. My sister's the ER doc for the VA here in DC. So it's an area that I think that is ripe for support. And so I think it's like really growing our platform in our existing markets and also pushing these others where we know there's a huge need. I think youth sports is another example. I'm actually way more interested in youth sports. I prefer in professional sports in a lot of ways. And I think it's only getting harder on those kids, especially now with NIL and everything like that. So I would say that's in the short term. And in the longer term, I would say, what does a integrated comprehensive platform look like? I think you hear a lot about, the importance of and the relatability of physical health and mental health. This is like a great time to really try that out of like, how do we really integrate those in a way that we haven't seen before in the marketplace? And that's something that is not just on the athlete side, but on the coaching and training side too. So I think like kind of like learning from our clients, learning from new coaches and kind of the industry leaders, like the best and most productive way to do that but really implementing a solution that we feel like can really capture both of those worlds and put it in a way that people want to engage with.
I want to talk about advocacy because as
Mhm.
we started the conversation when we got on here, you and I crossed paths initially after an adventure on Capitol Hill, delivering the message of the FIT Act, which is the Personal Health Investment Today Act. Why was it so important for you to get your voice to Capitol Hill and amplify this message?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about, I'd say healthcare, especially, or any regulated sector, the only way, in my opinion, you do substantive change is through policy. I think part of it is like really understanding the system better so that we can, we can have a better dialogue to really bring industry to government, because I don't think government really understands industry a lot of times. They definitely didn't understand the fitness side of stuff. And that's why they closed like every facility in COVID and stuff. I think I really want to be part of helping kind of bridge that disconnect between industry and government, and whether that's healthcare and whether that's fitness. And with the fit, in my opinion, it's kind of the intersection of both. And I think not just on the government side, but I do think even the fitness side is trying to get more into like kind of that integrated healthcare ecosystem where, now you can, meet with a doctor in some gyms. And now like, I think the Fit Act it's not just about, fitness memberships. It's about youth sports. It's about mental health. It's about preventative healthcare. And so I think I hope it's just kind of the first inning of a really longer strategy for the fitness community to serve as like a more integral part of the healthcare ecosystem. And so I feel like we kind of operate at ZAMA and now Volt at that intersection already. And I felt like we could lend a voice that could help, support that and push that forward. So was really excited to be invited last year, and really happy that we get to go do that again.
The thing that's so interesting to watch is this little exponent. Every single one of you that goes up there, and obviously, whether it be on LinkedIn or your personal platforms, you're amplifying the message even further. And then I think more people are getting curious. And obviously, we have listeners that aren't just from the United States. I know for Canada, we have tax line 30399 that we're trying to get passed for similar reasons, for it to
Yep.
be a medical expense. The crazy part for us, the language already exists in the legislation. It just says ineligible instead of eligible. Riddle me that. And then we see a lot of similar efforts as well in UK. So this really is a global issue. And I think that's where getting the unified voice is even better. Advocacy doesn't stop just on a day, so that there's
Yeah.
a lot of opportunities when they are in wherever they're operating, making those connections with local government, and truthfully, just having an understanding of exactly what people are advocating for. Because to your point, where we saw all the closures, physical activity was penalized because it wasn't seen as this essential part of our healthcare. And that's truly the overarching message, is the fact that this is preventative healthcare. It will save billions of dollars if this was something to be passed. And it's
Yeah.
even when you look for the business case, you're like, the business case is there as well. I think it's just one of those things that the industry as a whole and all the different facets of the industry, because to your point as well, it's much more than just gyms and health clubs. If everyone gets under one banner, it's going to be hard to ignore.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think, and I think that's also why it's really important too to kind of continue. And I know there's a lot of great folks that are working on it too, of like, how do we really kind of better integrate fitness with kind of the healthcare community? And I do think that's actually, it seems that it's getting better, and I think that will continue to happen. And I think that's also what consumers want too. So, I mean, I'm not taking a view on GLP-1s or anything like that, but you're seeing that obviously that's exploding. That
Yeah.
is, yeah, it is healthcare in a fitness way that we haven't really seen before. So I think it's all to say like this is just where the industry is going in terms of this integration of both of these worlds. And I think a lot of people are trying to figure out like, what does that mean and what does that look like? And I think going to these advocacy things and hearing from congressmen and hearing from folks who do talk to a lot of other people too, that in itself is a helpful data input to our group and everyone of how we want to kind of go about that. So another reason why I just think it's helpful.
Yeah, GLP-1s. We won't go there, but I have a lot of I have a very mixed, it depends on which avenue we're speaking it to. For the people that it's just cosmetic, I'm like, well, I can see it. There's an appetite for it for sure. Obviously, obesity crisis. I mean, this is going to have tremendous waves, but that's another conversation for another day. It's such
Yeah.
a fascinating space though to watch it grow, and it makes a lot of sense that the fitness industry would align with it, because
muscle loss, big risk there. You need to make sure that you're still getting a gym or getting your exercise in. But for
Yeah.
yourself, obviously, the conversation has more centered around mental health. So, on the topic of it being Mental Health Month in the conversation right now,
Yeah.
what message do you really hope to get out there for people when it comes to the importance of understanding that it is correlated to our overall health care?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like I just feel like it doesn't have to personally be so in your face. Like it can really just be like when you think about, things that stress you out in life, like whether it's work or whether it's relationship or like that's all mental health. It doesn't have to be like a term that's just used when you want to meet with like a therapist or whatever. And so I think just recognizing that like when you just think about your kind of overall well-being and everything, in my opinion, mental health is the nucleus to it all, because at the end of the day it always kind of goes back to your brain. So I think like what our approach has just been is like, do you just want to be a healthier person? And so like, are you kind of like addressing, you don't even have to say the word mental health, like that can be a byproduct of what you're doing to improve things like sleep or performance or whatever. And so I think like I view it as a way of like, it doesn't necessarily have to be a term that's utilized. It's more of just the importance of really looking at your overall health in a holistic way and doing these different things, and incorporating mindfulness exercises and stuff is just as important as doing, a post-workout stretch type of thing. If you don't do it, are you going to die? Probably no, but like, that doesn't mean it's not a good thing to do. And so I think the more and more people can, again, correlate what you do in a physical health setting to kind of these more kind of mindfulness types of practices, I think the more it's going to be easier for people to digest. So I think it's just like taking a more of a comprehensive look at your daily routine and what that means. And I think then you will get to mental health without having to kind of like, jump on a screen and say, I think mental health is important, which I'm not saying that's not a good thing to do, but I do think that it doesn't have to be like this in your face thing either.
Fair.
And I also think with fitness too, and what I love fitness is like, there's so many like there's so many like data now, like working out is like the best thing for you. It's the best thing to prevent chronic disease. It's really helpful for your mental health. It's great for sleep and all these things that, are really core to longevity. So that's the other thing too, is like, you can do these other types of activities or things that aren't mental health necessarily, but they do really help it. And so I think that's kind of the approach that we're trying to take. It's like kind of like a little more subtle, I guess is the way to put it.
But it makes sense because the consistency does compound, just like with our physical health. It's like if you're showing up with those every day, it does compound.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I think once it starts to kind of get into the more normal vernacular of like how we talk about things too, of like, it doesn't have to be this like weird thing to say, like you met with a therapist, or just that like you're not feeling great mentally and you need to go for a walk or something to clear your head, or and so I think like the more like there's just kind of open dialogue about certain things. Again, I'm not saying like you need to start crying to your coworker or whatever, but there's a balance to all of this, that I think that we're all still figuring out what that means and what we can get comfortable with. And I think that the best way to do that is just more kind of conversation and stuff.
Absolutely. Well, and I think that's what's so great. I know even Dan came on and was really open about his mental health struggles along the way. And while it's important, obviously yourself even saying, I just came off the most stressful year and a half of my life kind of thing.
Yeah.
And but I do think it's important to have people, especially that are leaders and leadership, saying, I walk in these shoes as well. There's a lot of power in that because it does start to normalize the conversation. And at the end of the day, we're all humans with brains trying to figure it out. And brains can be our best and worst enemy at the same
Yeah.
time. Thoughts are always going to happen. And so it's finding ways to manage those thoughts and realize what's helpful, what's true, what's intrusive, and navigate our way through all of that. So it is important to have the conversations. Obviously, yes, it was very stressful, but this is an exciting time with the acquisition. So you talked a little bit about short and long-term plans, but to kind of end off our conversation, after this stressful time, I'm curious, what is making you most excited as you look forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm most excited about, well, one, it's really I do really love the team. I think everyone has been incredibly supportive, and I think it's kind of rare because I've been, I've in my past, like I've helped with like a couple acquisitions for companies and been a part of that. And I just feel like, sometimes people believe in something and sometimes don't. And like, I mean, people could be lying to me, but I really do believe that the team and everyone is really believes in this idea of like holistic health and are excited to kind of be a part of like trying to kind of figure that all out. And so I think it's fun to be with a group that is aligned there, and they're just like really, really bright, really supportive. I've known Dan again for a while. Trevor's also awesome. Jenna, you probably know too. She's been super helpful with stuff. So I'm really excited to just have a group around that's like really motivated and really passionate about this space. That's probably most. And I think secondly, at the end of the day, in order to build a company or build a product that's actually meaningful, I think you really do need that kind of type of environment behind you. So I'm excited that I feel like we are set up well for the future to really accomplish, I think, what we want to do, which is deliver this, kind of new type of comprehensive platform that we haven't really seen before.
It's one of those moments where you realize you landed exactly where you're supposed to be. So
yeah, exactly.
Huge congratulations to you, because that is a very big deal, and all that stress in the making, very much worth it, because with hard work and perseverance comes great things. So massive congratulations, Brandon. And thank you for sharing your voice on behalf of the industry as well, and putting yourself out there to learn the land of advocacy, because at the end of the day, I think what you're all advocating for truly does make a profound difference in the world. We know this. As you said before, the stats exist and are endless of what our physical health means for our mental health and our social health. So kudos to you for just using your intelligence to actually create difference in the world.
Well, we have you to thank for putting a spotlight on this, because advocacy is only good as the attention it gets. So thank you for kind of showcasing what we're all doing. And it's been awesome following kind of your journey as well.
You've just listened to the All Things Fitness and Wellness podcast, hosted by Krissy Vann. This episode was brought to you by Fitness World, your fitness, your way. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. We have new podcast episodes weekly featuring industry insiders and influencers. Together, we're on a mission for everyone to live a life fit and well.